You're not getting a cent. You've always been a disappointment." Those were the words my own mother, Eleanor Vance, chose to say at her 60th birthday party, in front of 200 people. The chandeliers sparkled, the champagne flowed, and my mother stood in her designer gown, surrounded by admirers who laughed at every word she said. I, Sierra, stood at the bar, nursing a glass of scotch, the outcast daughter who never quite fit into the perfect picture she painted of our family. The Grandview Country Club had never felt colder. My brother, Trey, passed by with that smug smile he always wore, his Rolex catching the light. He didn't look at me. He never did anymore. We hadn't spoken since I refused to lie for him about his so-called business trip that ended up being a romantic getaway with his assistant. He got away with everything, because that's how it had always been. He was the golden boy. I was the burden that came with conditions. When my mother called my name across the room, I already knew it wouldn't end well. "Everyone, this is my daughter, Sierra," she said, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "She works at a little charity for the less fortunate." Her friends chuckled like well-trained dogs. I smiled politely, but my chest burned. Then she leaned closer, eyes sharp, voice just loud enough to carry through the room. "You're not getting a cent, Sierra. You've always been a disappointment." The laughter stopped. Glasses froze midair. Even the pianist hesitated over the keys. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at her. My mother's lips curved in triumph, certain she had broken me one last time in public. But instead of tears, I lifted my glass and smiled. "That's okay," I said softly. "I'm here to celebrate anyway. And to let you know I'm moving to Zurich. Permanently." The words hit her harder than any insult could. Her smile faltered. Her face lost its color. Around us, whispers began to ripple. I took another sip of champagne and walked away, leaving her frozen in her perfect pose, surrounded by people who suddenly didn't know where to look. My heels clicked against the marble floor, steady, confident, free. That night wasn't my humiliation. It was my release. Outside, the cold air met my skin, and I finally exhaled. Years of trying to earn love that was never offered had ended in that ballroom. I had been cut out of her will, but what she didn't know was that I had already built a life she couldn't touch. My new position in Zurich was waiting for me, a future she'd never believed I could create. That party was supposed to be her victory, but it became the moment I walked out of her shadow. She thought she took everything from me, but she only gave me one thing, freedom. And that was worth more than all her money combined. When I walked out of that party, my hands were shaking, but my heart felt calm. For the first time, I didn't feel small or powerless. I didn't know what the future would bring, but I knew I was done being their easy target. The next few days were loud and messy. 17 missed calls from Mom, angry voicemails from Trey, and a few pity texts from relatives pretending to care. I didn't answer any of them. Silence was my new language, and it felt good. My small apartment became a place of change. My best friend, Chloe, showed up the next morning with boxes and coffee. She didn't ask questions. She just helped me pack. Frank, my boss, threw me a small farewell party at our favorite pub. They made toasts, laughed, and told me how proud they were. That night, surrounded by people who actually cared, I realized family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the ones who show up when you're breaking and help you rebuild quietly. While sorting through old photos, I started remembering how it had always been. My brother Trey got celebrations for everything: birthdays, promotions, even small wins. When he made the junior varsity baseball team, Mom threw a dinner for 20 people. When I won the state science fair, she barely looked up from her phone. "That's nice, honey," she had said, already distracted. That was my place in the house, background noise to their perfect image. Every praise I earned sounded like an accident to her, as if she couldn't accept that her daughter might be more than her shadow. But the party wasn't the real breaking point. The truth is, my patience had run out months before. 6 months earlier, I led a project that changed everything for my organization. We secured a massive grant that allowed a new community center to be built for underprivileged kids. It was one of the proudest moments of my life. My name was in the newspaper, and for once, I thought my mother would finally say she was proud. I called her, my voice filled with excitement. She listened for a few seconds and said, "That's lovely, dear. Listen, Trey just got a new sports car. I have to go." Then she hung up. Just like that. My achievement meant nothing, because it wasn't Trey's. That phone call broke something in me. Not my heart, but my attachment to her approval. I realized I could work my whole life, and she'd still see me as less than him. That day, I stopped trying to fit into her version of success. I started planning a new life, one where I didn't need her money, her validation, or her attention. The Zurich job offer became more than a career move. It was an escape plan. I didn't tell anyone in my family. I wanted to leave quietly, without another argument or lecture. By the time the party happened, my decision was already made. Her words that night didn't hurt. They confirmed everything I already knew. I wasn't the disappointment she claimed. I was simply the daughter who stopped begging to be seen. And walking away wasn't weakness. It was the first real victory of my life. After that phone call with my mother, something in me shifted. I stopped waiting for her approval and started focusing on what I could control, my own future. Months earlier, before everything fell apart, a headhunter had reached out to me about a position at the Global Economic Development Fund in Zurich. At that time, I had brushed it off. I didn't think I was ready for such a big leap, and honestly, I doubted myself. But after that humiliating call and the way my achievements were ignored, I called her back. I didn't want to prove anything to anyone anymore. I just wanted to see how far I could go when I stopped holding myself back. The first interview was nerve-wracking. They asked tough questions about international projects, funding models, and my approach to sustainable development. I spoke from experience, not theory, explaining how real people benefited from the programs I helped create. They seemed intrigued. One interview turned into 2, then 3. The final stage was a full presentation before the board. I worked on it day and night, creating a plan that showed how local communities could thrive through global partnerships. When I finished, the director smiled and said, "Your practical approach is exactly what this organization needs." That one sentence felt more genuine than any compliment I had ever received from my own family. When the official offer arrived, I stared at it for a long time. The position was beyond anything I had dreamed of, Director of Emerging Markets. The salary was 3 times what I earned, and the relocation package included everything from housing to travel. It wasn't just a job, it was a doorway to an entirely different life. I accepted it immediately. For the first time, I felt like I had real control over my destiny. But I told no one. Keeping it a secret wasn't about revenge. It was about peace. My mother and brother had always twisted my success into something small, something unimportant. I didn't want their comments poisoning what I was building. So, while they thought I was stuck at my small charity, I was quietly preparing to lead major international projects. My days were filled with visa paperwork, housing arrangements, and countless preparations, all while pretending life was the same. Every step brought me closer to freedom. There was something empowering about staying silent. My secret gave me strength. It reminded me that I didn't need validation anymore. I was working towards something bigger than their approval, a life built entirely by my choices. Every morning, as I went to work like usual, I smiled knowing I was weeks away from leaving it all behind. By the time my mother threw her grand birthday party, everything was already in motion. I had signed the contract, received my relocation documents, and booked my flight. So, when she tried to humiliate me in front of everyone, I didn't feel pain. I felt calm. That night wasn't about her words. It was about what she didn't know. While she mocked me for being just a charity worker, I was already the director of emerging markets for one of the most respected organizations in the world. My silence that night wasn't weakness. It was power, the quiet kind that doesn't need to shout to be heard. A few days after the party, my phone rang. It was my father. His tone was heavy, as if the world had ended. "Sierra, your mother is devastated. What you did was very selfish," he said. I almost laughed at the irony. My mother had humiliated me in front of hundreds of people, and now I was the selfish one for walking away. I didn't raise my voice. I simply told him the truth. How many times she had insulted me, compared me to Trey, and made me feel worthless while he stood there and said nothing. The silence that followed was long and uncomfortable. I could hear him breathing on the other end, but he had no words, no defense. That silence told me everything. He knew I was right. He just didn't have the courage to admit it. Not long after, Trey showed up at my apartment. He didn't knock gently. He barged in, his face red, his voice already raised. "You're tearing this family apart," he shouted, as if I were the cause of all their problems. I looked at him calmly and said, "The family was broken long before I walked away. You were just the favorite piece they liked to show off." His expression changed from anger to confusion. I reminded him of the messages he had sent me, begging me to lie for him about his so-called business trip. For a moment, his eyes flickered with panic. He knew I could expose him at any time. He said nothing after that, just turned around and left. Watching him walk out felt like closing the final chapter of a painful story. Once they were gone, I started packing again, this time for good. My apartment looked emptier by the hour, but it didn't make me sad. I donated everything that didn't fit into my new life. Old clothes, furniture, pictures. Things that once held meaning now felt like weight I didn't need to carry anymore. There was no room for the past and where I was going. Each box sealed was a small act of freedom. Every drawer I cleared out reminded me that I was finally in control of my own life. For the first time, I wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. I wasn't running away from them. I was simply moving forward without them. It was strange how light I felt, as if years of guilt and rejection had suddenly fallen off my shoulders. The night before my flight, I sat by the window with a cup of tea, looking at the city lights. My phone buzzed a few times, but I didn't bother checking it. I knew it was probably another guilt trip from home, another attempt to pull me back into their chaos. But I was done. I had nothing left to explain, no apology left to give. The girl who once begged to be seen was gone. What remained was someone stronger, quieter, and free. Walking away wasn't revenge, it was recovery. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel lost. I felt ready. When I landed in Zurich, everything felt different. The air, the people, the silence. It was clean, calm, and organized, like a city that had no time for drama. My new apartment was small but bright, with large windows that opened to the Limmat River. I could hear the gentle sound of water flowing every morning, and it became a reminder that life keeps moving forward, no matter what's left behind. Starting over in a new country was scary, but it was also freeing. No one here knew my name, my family, or the weight of my past. I could finally be who I wanted to be without judgment. Work became my anchor. The office was filled with people who respected skill more than reputation. They didn't care about my background or who my parents were. They cared about results. In the first few weeks, I observed more than I spoke, learning how things worked. The pace was fast, but I adapted quickly. Within a few months, I was leading meetings and managing major projects. One of them involved securing international funding for sustainable startups in Eastern Europe. It was complex and demanding, but when it succeeded, it put my name on the map. My team congratulated me genuinely, and for once the praise felt real. It wasn't flattery or obligation, it was earned. Outside of work, life slowly began to take shape. I met Lars, a Dutch painter who lived in the same building. He had an easy smile and loved talking about art, colors, and freedom. Then there was Anya, a Swiss lawyer with a sharp sense of humor and a heart as disciplined as her schedule. We often met for coffee, sharing stories about our pasts without pity or judgment. These friendships filled the empty spaces that family once occupied. They reminded me that new connections could be honest and warm, even without blood ties. I also met Daniel, an architect with thoughtful eyes and quiet confidence. He wasn't interested in where I came from or what I owned. He admired my independence and how I stood my ground. Our relationship grew naturally. No games, no pretending. We spent weekends hiking, exploring villages, or simply cooking together at home. With him, I didn't have to prove my worth. He saw it already. Learning to ski became another unexpected joy. I fell many times at first, but each fall made me laugh instead of frown. It was a reminder that mistakes could be part of the fun. For the first time, life wasn't about survival, it was about living. I didn't check my phone for messages from home anymore. I didn't crave their approval. My days were full, my nights peaceful. Zurich didn't erase my past, but it gave me something better, a future that belonged entirely to me. The city became more than a place. It became proof that I could build a life on my own terms. I no longer carried the weight of disappointment. I had replaced it with peace, purpose, and quiet pride in the person I had finally become. A year had passed since I left everything behind. My new life in Zurich had settled into quiet stability when an email arrived from Aunt Carol. She never wrote unless something serious had happened. Her message was short. My father had a minor heart issue, and my mother wanted to see me. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. The old me would have panicked, packed a bag, and flown back immediately. But that person no longer existed. Instead, I ordered a bouquet of elegant white lilies and roses and sent them to the hospital. The card read, "Wishing you a swift recovery." That was all. No message of love, no promise to visit. Just polite distance wrapped in courtesy. It wasn't revenge, it was closure in disguise. 2 days later, my phone rang. The number flashed familiar, one I hadn't seen in over a year. I answered. Her voice trembled, softer than I remembered. "You sent flowers," she said. "I did, but you're not coming." "No." There was silence. I could hear the faint hum of hospital machines on her end. For a second, I almost felt pity, but it faded quickly. "Your father misses you," she said. "He could have died." "I'm glad he's getting better," I replied calmly. "I truly hope he does." Her tone sharpened. "You're abandoning your family when they need you most." I took a slow breath before answering. "You disowned me, Mom. In front of everyone. Remember? I'm just honoring what you said." That quiet truth lingered in the air. She didn't know what to say. I could sense her trying to hold control, but her silence told me everything. For years, I had begged for her approval, chased her attention like it was oxygen. Now, she was the one trying to pull me back, and I was the one walking away. After I hung up, I stood by my apartment window, watching the snow fall over Zurich. The streets glowed softly under the city lights. It struck me that peace doesn't always come wrapped in forgiveness. Sometimes it comes in refusal. I didn't need to yell or argue anymore. My calmness was louder than any anger I could show. Over the next week, more messages came. Some from distant relatives pretending to care, some trying to guilt me into returning. I ignored them all. I wasn't cruel, I was done. There's a difference. I realized then that power doesn't come from revenge or shouting your worth. It comes from knowing when to stay silent. My mother once controlled every emotion I had. Now, she couldn't even touch my peace. That day, I didn't lose anything. I confirmed what I had already learned, that walking away wasn't weakness, it was strength. I didn't need their approval anymore. The life I built in Zurich was proof that I could stand without them. And in that quiet moment, I finally understood what freedom truly felt like. It was late evening when my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in years. For a moment, I hesitated, then answered. Trey's voice came through, unsteady, almost broken. He tried to sound composed, but the cracks were obvious. "Sierra," he said, "I need your help. My investment fell apart. It was supposed to be a sure thing, but everything's gone. I've lost nearly everything. The house, the cars, even Amy's leaving. Please, I just need a loan. Something to get back on my feet." For a long moment, I said nothing. I could hear the panic beneath his words, the same desperation I once knew all too well. The confident brother who once looked down on me now sounded small, stripped of that smugness he wore like armor. "Trey," I finally said, keeping my tone calm, "I'm sorry you're going through this." He exhaled sharply, thinking I was about to agree. But I continued. "My money is for building lives, not fixing mistakes that keep repeating. There was silence. Then his voice hardened. You don't understand. I just need. I cut him off gently but firmly. You had every chance, Trey. Every opportunity. I won't rescue you from what you created. He tried to guilt me, saying I owed the family, that I was heartless, that I had changed. He was right about one thing. I had changed. The old me would have tried to help, even if it meant sacrificing my peace. But that person was gone. I ended the call quietly, no anger, no satisfaction, just clarity. I felt lighter than I had in years. His downfall wasn't something I wanted, but it was something he'd built himself. Every choice he made had led him there. That night, I sat by the window, looking out at the calm Zurich skyline. I thought about how roles had shifted. The one they all pitted had become the one standing tall, while the golden child was crumbling under the weight of his pride. I didn't feel revenge. What I felt was release. For years, I carried guilt for not being the daughter, sister, or person they wanted. But in that call, I realized something. Their approval had always been a leash, and I had finally broken it. I didn't call him back. I didn't check on him later. Some lessons can't be learned with sympathy. They require silence. He needed to face the same reality I once faced, the one where no one comes to save you, and you have to rebuild from the ground up. As I closed my phone and turned off the lights, I smiled faintly. It wasn't joy, it was peace. I wasn't tied to his chaos anymore. For the first time, I felt completely free. Not from them, but from the part of me that used to beg for their love. 2 years had passed since I walked away from everything. Zurich had become home, and my life was calm, balanced, and mine. Then one morning, while checking my emails before work, I saw her name, Eleanor. My breath caught. For a second, I thought it was a mistake, but the subject line read, "From your mother." I hesitated before opening it. Part of me didn't want to see whatever excuse she had crafted this time. But curiosity won. The message wasn't what I expected. It wasn't defensive or cruel or filled with justifications. It was human. She said her therapist had encouraged her to reach out. She wrote about her own childhood, about being raised by a mother who never showed warmth. She confessed she thought being hard on me would make me strong, that she believed love had to be earned, not given. And then came the line that stopped me. You were never the disappointment, Sierra. I was. I am so sorry. I sat there for a long time, staring at the words. My first reaction wasn't relief. It was confusion. This was the woman who had humiliated me, who had dismissed every achievement, who had turned my successes into her jokes. And now she was apologizing? I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't reply. Not for days, not even for weeks. Instead, I talked about it with my therapist. We unpacked every word, every feeling. I admitted that part of me wanted to forgive her, but another part couldn't trust that it was real. After all those years of neglect and judgment, one email couldn't undo the damage. But still, it meant something. It acknowledged that the pain I carried wasn't imagined. It was real, and she finally saw it. When I finally wrote back, I kept my words simple. I thanked her for her apology and said I was glad she had the courage to reflect on the past. I told her that I was happy with my life, and that while I wasn't ready for closeness, I was open to keeping in touch through occasional, respectful messages. I needed her to understand that forgiveness didn't mean return. It meant peace, but on my terms. When I sent the email, I felt no guilt, no anger, only calm. Setting that boundary wasn't cold, it was necessary. For years, she had drawn the lines, deciding what love looked like. Now, I was the one setting the limits. Weeks later, she replied with a short note. Thank you, Sierra. That's more than I deserve. I read it once and closed my laptop. It wasn't closure, not fully, but it was something better, recognition. She couldn't fix the past, and I didn't need her to. All I needed was what I had always wanted, honesty. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. It had been 3 years since I last stepped on American soil when the message came. Aunt Carol had passed away. She was one of the few family members who ever treated me with warmth, so I knew I had to go. The flight felt long, not just in hours, but in emotions. I wasn't nervous about being back in the country. I was uneasy about seeing her again, my mother. When I landed, the chill of autumn hit me. Everything looked familiar yet distant, like a photograph of a place I used to know. At the funeral, faces turned when I walked in. Some smiled politely, others whispered. But none of that mattered. My eyes found Eleanor standing near the front, dressed in black, her posture stiff but her face pale and drawn. When she saw me, something changed in her eyes. Not the sharp judgment I remembered, but something softer. She stepped toward me slowly, as if afraid I'd disappear. Then she hugged me. Her arms felt lighter, weaker, nothing like the powerful woman who once ruled every room. "You look happy," she whispered. "I am," I said simply. We stood there quietly, two women who once couldn't be in the same room without pain, now bound by loss and time. There was no dramatic apology, no tears. Just a strange, quiet understanding that life had moved on for both of us. After the service, she asked if I would come to the house for coffee. I hesitated, then agreed. The drive there felt surreal. The house looked the same from the outside, but inside it felt like a museum, silent, still, untouched by joy. Every piece of furniture, every photo on the wall, carried memories that no longer held power over me. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table. The same table where she once dismissed my achievements now stood between us like a fragile bridge. She poured the coffee herself, her hands trembling slightly. "How's Zurich?" she asked softly. I told her about my work, the projects, the people I'd met. This time she listened, really listened. There were no sarcastic comments, no forced compliments. Just quiet nods. When I finished, she said, "You've built a good life." It wasn't dramatic, but it meant everything. I didn't need her approval anymore, but hearing that simple acknowledgement felt like the closing of a long, painful chapter. Before I left, she walked me to the door. "Thank you for coming," she said. I nodded, unsure what else to say. There was no perfect ending, no grand reconciliation, just a fragile peace built on mutual understanding. As I drove away, I glanced at the house one last time. It looked smaller now, less intimidating. I realized I wasn't that girl anymore, the one who begged to be seen. I had found my own worth, far from that place. And in that moment, I finally felt free. Not from her, but from the version of myself she used to define. The day I got married was quiet and peaceful, nothing like the loud and dramatic events of my past. The ceremony took place in a small chapel high in the Swiss Alps, surrounded by snow-covered peaks and the people who had become my true family. Chloe cried through her speech, Frank made everyone laugh, and Lars played soft music on his guitar. My husband stood beside me, smiling with the kind of warmth that makes the world feel safe. There was no pressure, no judgment, only love that asked for nothing in return. Before the ceremony, I received a letter. It was from my mother. Her handwriting was neat but shaky. She wrote that she was truly happy for me and wished she could see me walk down the aisle. There was no guilt hidden in her words this time, only sincerity. I didn't cry when I read it, but I smiled. It was the kind of peace I had stopped hoping for long ago. In the months after the wedding, our emails continued. Nothing emotional or complicated, just small, steady exchanges. She told me about her roses blooming early, about trying new recipes, about the weather back home. I wrote about my travels, my work, and sometimes shared photos from the mountains. There were no arguments, no old wounds reopened. It was calm. For once, we had found a way to speak without hurting each other. One evening, sitting by the window overlooking the river, I thought about how everything had turned out. For so long, I had believed that revenge meant proving my worth to them. But it wasn't about that. It was about learning to live without their approval, to find peace within myself. I had built a life they could neither control nor diminish. That was the real victory. They once believed that money and power made them strong. I learned that real strength is quiet. It's the ability to walk away and still find joy. Their rejection once broke me, but it also pushed me to create something better. When my mother said I was a disappointment, she had no idea that those words would become the reason I succeeded. Today, my success speaks for itself. My happiness is my answer, and it's louder than any insult ever thrown my way.